Let's be honest, people lie more than you think. And it's not just strangers. It's the ones you trust the most. Your friend, your partner, even your own family. We like to believe we can spot a liar. We tell ourselves we'd see the signs. But the truth? Most people don't. Not because the signs aren't there, but because they refuse to see them. I know this because I've been there. I once believed I had a sharp instinct for reading people until I found out someone I deeply trusted had been lying to me for months. The worst part? The signs were all there. The way they hesitated before answering. The extra details they added, hoping to sound more convincing. The sudden irritation when I asked a simple question. But I ignored it. Not because I didn't notice, because I didn't want to believe it. That's how deception works. It doesn't just rely on the liar being convincing. It depends on you wanting the lie to be true. Seneca once said, "He who does not prevent a crime when he can, encourages it." The same applies to lies. When you refuse to see the truth, you give liars the power to keep deceiving you. Here's the cold reality. People lie. Some do it to protect themselves. Some do it to manipulate. Some do it because they've done it for so long, they don't even know how to stop. And the sooner you accept this, the faster you'll start seeing through their act. So, if you're ready to strip away the illusions, to stop being the person who gets played, pay attention. Here are the undeniable signs someone is lying to you. Brace yourself, because the truth might hit closer than you expect. 1. When the truth makes them run. Ever talk to someone who dodged your questions so fast it felt like a game of verbal dodgeball? You bring up something real, something important, and the moment things get uncomfortable, they switch topics like a magician pulling a trick. 1 second, you're discussing your future, and the next, they're rambling about what they ate for breakfast or some random thing they saw online. It's not a coincidence. It's not forgetfulness. It's a calculated move, an escape route they've mastered. I learned this lesson the hard way. I was in a relationship where this happened all the time, but at first, I didn't even notice it. I'd ask simple questions. Where do you see us in a year? Or, how do you handle difficult situations? And somehow, we'd end up talking about movies, dinner plans, or someone else's drama. It was subtle. So sneaky, I almost convinced myself it was innocent. I told myself they just weren't ready to talk, that maybe I was being too serious. But the truth, they weren't avoiding the conversation. They were avoiding responsibility. People don't just change the subject for no reason. They do it because facing the truth is uncomfortable. And let's be honest, many people would rather dance around the truth than confront it. They think if they pretend a problem doesn't exist, it will magically disappear. And you? You let it slide because you don't want to push too hard. You don't want to seem demanding or too much. You don't want to be the one disrupting the so-called peace. But here's what most people don't realize. Dodging the hard conversations doesn't prevent conflict. It invites dishonesty. Every time you let someone steer away from the truth, you're silently accepting the lie. You're giving them permission to keep deceiving you. And over time, this eats away at trust, not in one big explosion, but in tiny, invisible cracks, until one day, the whole thing collapses. Seneca once said, "A liar is not believed even when he speaks the truth." That's the real danger. When someone consistently avoids honesty, you stop trusting anything they say. Even their truths start feeling like lies. Because what is a lie, really? It's not just false words. It's also the truths that go unspoken, the stories left incomplete, the questions that never get real answers. Think about it. If someone can't even have a tough conversation with you, what else are they running from? If they value their own comfort more than your clarity, what does that say about your relationship? Whether it's a friend, a partner, or even a colleague, A strong bond isn't built on half-truths. It's built on courage. The courage to face the uncomfortable, to answer the hard questions, to be real even when it's not easy. I had to learn this the painful way. Every time I let the conversation shift, I was silently agreeing to be kept in the dark. I wanted to believe everything was fine, so I let them change the subject. But that's the trap. You start telling yourself their avoidance isn't a big deal, until one day you wake up and realize you've been lied to, not just by them, but by yourself. So here's what I've learned. If someone values you, they won't run from tough conversations. They won't need an escape route. They'll stand in the fire with you, no matter how uncomfortable it gets. And if they can't, if they keep dodging and deflecting, then maybe it's time to stop asking questions and start asking yourself, what kind of relationship are you really building? Because honesty, however painful, creates unshakable trust. But avoidance? That only leads to an ending you never saw coming. 2. The power of silence. Most people don't really listen. They just wait for their turn to talk. They nod, smile, throw in the occasional "yeah" or "I know what you mean," but their mind is already racing ahead, crafting the next brilliant response. And that's not listening. That's just waiting to speak. The truth is, when you're not listening to understand, you're wasting your time and theirs. I've been guilty of it too. Sitting in conversations, pretending to be engaged, while my brain was busy rehearsing what I was going to say next. And here's the thing. People can feel it. They know when they're not truly being heard. It doesn't make them feel valued. It makes them feel invisible. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You always own the option of having no opinion." But that's where most people go wrong. They think every conversation is a debate, a chance to prove something, to sound smart, to fix someone's problem. But not everything needs a response. Sometimes silence is more powerful than words. I remember a conversation with a colleague who was clearly struggling. My instinct was to jump in, to give advice, to fix things. But instead, I stopped myself. I said nothing. I just listened. No interruptions, no solutions, just presence. And something unexpected happened. They kept talking. They opened up more than they ever had before. By the end of it, they looked at me and said, "I've never felt so heard." That's when it hit me. People don't always want advice. They don't need you to have the perfect words. They just want to feel understood. And in a world where everyone is too busy talking, genuine listening is a rare gift. Think about it. When was the last time someone listened to you, truly listened, without interrupting, without waiting for their turn? Feels rare, doesn't it? That's because most people don't realize that listening isn't just about hearing words. It's about hearing what's beneath the words. The hesitation in their voice, the emotion behind their pauses, the things they aren't saying out loud. This is why the most charming, magnetic, and respected people aren't the best talkers. They're the best listeners. They make others feel seen, understood, and valued. And when you do that, people remember you. They trust you. They open up to you in ways they wouldn't with anyone else. Seneca once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." But do we? Or are we just waiting for a pause so we can jump in with our own story? Real listening isn't passive. It's active. It's not about sitting there silently while the other person talks. It's about being fully present, tuning into their words, their emotions, their pauses. It's about making them feel safe enough to share what they really mean. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you're always the one doing the talking, you're missing out. You're missing out on deeper connections, on real understanding, on the kind of trust that only comes from truly hearing someone. So next time you're in a conversation, try this. Hold back. Don't rush to respond. Don't try to fix things. just listen. Let the silence do the work. Watch how people start to open up, how they start to trust you more, how they begin to see you differently, not as just another person who talks, but as someone who truly gets them. That's the power of silence. That's the magic of real connection. 3. When guilt speaks louder than words. Ever ask someone a simple, harmless question, and suddenly they act like you just accused them of a crime? You say, "Hey, did you take the last slice of pizza?" And boom, they launch into a whole dramatic speech about how they would never do such a thing, how it's insulting that you'd even ask, and how they can't believe you'd assume that about them. The reaction is so over the top, you start wondering if you accidentally uncovered some deep secret. That's what I call guilt speaking louder than words. It's a massive red flag, and if you're paying attention, it tells you one thing: they're hiding something. I've seen this firsthand. I was once working on a group project, and one of my teammates would get defensive every time I asked him for an update. Nothing aggressive, nothing accusatory. I'd just say, "Hey, how's the report coming along?" And instead of a simple answer, he'd snap back with, "Why do you always think I'm slacking off? I work hard. I don't need to be micromanaged." Keep in mind, this was the same guy who spent most of our meetings scrolling through his phone. His reaction wasn't about my question, it was about covering up the fact that he had barely done any work. And sure enough, we later found out that he had been slacking off the whole time. There's an old saying, "A hit dog will holler." In other words, the one who reacts the most is usually the one with something to hide. Most people think defensiveness is just a personality quirk, someone being touchy, sensitive, or just having a bad day. But the truth? If someone consistently reacts this way to innocent questions, it's a red flag. Honest people don't feel the need to defend themselves against things that aren't true. They answer calmly, directly, and without all the theatrics. But guilty people? They're always on high alert, like they're waiting for the moment their secret gets exposed. And here's where most people go wrong. They ignore these defensive reactions. They assume they're overthinking. They don't want to push too hard or make the other person uncomfortable. But that's exactly how deception thrives, by making you feel like the bad guy for even asking. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If someone is trying to deceive you, they are already deceived by themselves." When someone lashes out at you for asking a simple question, they're not angry at you. They're angry that you got too close to the truth. Think about it. If a person had nothing to hide, why would they feel the need to turn a casual question into a full-blown argument? Why would they react with anger, offense, or even guilt if they were completely innocent? It doesn't add up. People will twist themselves into knots trying to avoid being caught in a lie. Some do it with silence, some do it with excuses, and some, they do it by attacking you. They shift the focus, make you feel guilty for even questioning them, and hope you'll back off. But that's exactly when you should pay closer attention. A person who values honesty will answer you clearly, without fear. But a person who fears being exposed, they'll use defensiveness as a shield. And the question you should be asking yourself isn't, "Did I offend them?" It's, "What are they so afraid of me finding out?" 4. When a story is too perfect to be true. Ever heard someone tell a story so polished, so perfectly timed, so cinematic that it felt like they had rehearsed it for an Oscar speech? Every detail fits too well, the emotions hit at just the right moment, and the whole thing sounds like it belongs in a movie. Well, here's the truth. Real life isn't that smooth. And if a story sounds too perfect, it's probably not real. I've run into this more times than I care to admit. There was this guy I knew. Let's call him Jake. He had a way with words, spinning tales so flawlessly that you'd swear he was living in an action movie. One time, he told us about this high-stakes business deal he supposedly closed. He described it in slow motion. The pen gliding across the contract, the firm handshake, the city skyline glowing behind him as he sealed the deal. You could almost hear the triumphant movie soundtrack playing in the background. But the problem? Reality is messy. Life doesn't come with background music. And when someone's story sounds like it's been prepped for a TED Talk, your gut should be telling you something. Turns out, Jake had exaggerated half of it and completely fabricated the rest. Here's where most people go wrong. We want to believe these stories. We enjoy hearing tales that are neat, engaging, and cinematic. So we let the little things slide, even when something doesn't quite add up. That's exactly what liars count on. They know that humans crave a satisfying narrative, something that makes sense, something easy to digest. But life? Life doesn't come in perfect packages. And when someone's story is too smooth, you're probably hearing fiction, not fact. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." That's the key. Liars don't just tell stories to impress. They tell stories to control. They don't want you to question them. They want you to accept their version of events without hesitation. Think about it. In real life, things rarely go exactly as planned. There are always complications, unexpected twists, and little details that don't quite fit. But when someone's story flows effortlessly, with no mistakes, no loose ends, no hesitations, that's a sign they're crafting a fantasy, not recounting the truth. I learned this the hard way when I started asking Jake follow-up questions. The moment I dug deeper, the crisp edges of his perfect story started to blur. The confident details turned vague. The flawless success story suddenly had contradictions. That's the thing about liars. They can rehearse, but they can't improvise. They expect you to nod along, not challenge them. And when you do, that's when the cracks start to show. Seneca once said, "Falsehoods, however well spun, will always unravel in the end." And that's exactly what happens when someone over-polishes a lie. The truth is never perfect. It's messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes hard to hear. And that's what makes it real. So the next time you hear someone tell a story that sounds too good to be true, don't just sit back and enjoy the show. Ask questions. Pay attention to the details. See if they can handle a little unpredictability. Because real life doesn't follow a script. And if someone's unwilling to show you the imperfections, they're not showing you the truth at all. The lesson? Life doesn't need to be perfect, to be honest. And anyone pretending otherwise is hiding more than they're willing to admit. 5. When the body speaks the truth. Ever had a conversation with someone who's looking right at you, talking like they're fully engaged, but their body is angled away, like they're already halfway out the door? Their words say, "I'm here," but their posture screams, "I don't want to be." It's one of those silent signals people don't think you'll notice, but trust me, it speaks louder than their words ever could. I had a friend like this. Whenever we got into deeper conversations, real, personal stuff, he would subtly shift his body away. At first, I thought it was just how he sat, maybe just a habit, but the more it happened, the clearer it became. The moment the conversation touched on something uncomfortable, his body would start turning, like it was trying to physically escape. It was subconscious, but it was real. Turns out, he had been hiding things. Nothing life-shattering, but enough to break some trust. The funny thing? His body knew it before his words ever gave it away. That's the thing about body language. It doesn't lie. People's mouths can say whatever they want, but their bodies will always tell you the truth. When someone turns away from you, even slightly, it's not just about comfort. It's about avoidance. They're not just shifting positions. They're creating distance. And that distance isn't just physical. It's emotional, mental, and psychological. Seneca once said, He who does not want to know the truth will never find it. That's exactly what's happening when someone can't face you directly. They're not just avoiding you, they're avoiding the truth. And most people ignore it. They brush it off as overthinking, tell themselves it's no big deal. But let's be real. If someone is physically pulling away from you while talking, it's not nothing. It's a sign, a crack in the surface. Maybe they're not telling you the full truth. Maybe they're uncomfortable with the conversation. Maybe they're afraid you'll see through them. Whatever the reason, their body is betraying them before they even realize it. I used to ignore these signs too. I thought, maybe I'm reading too much into this. Maybe it's just how they sit. But over time, I saw it happen again and again. And every single time, there was something deeper behind it. When people can't face you head-on, it's not just restlessness. It's hesitation. It's fear. It's guilt. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "A man should be upright, not kept upright." Honest people don't need to adjust themselves mid-conversation. They don't need to shield themselves from the truth. But people who are hiding something, they turn away, hoping you won't look too closely, hoping you won't notice the cracks forming beneath the surface. So here's the real lesson. Don't ignore what the body is telling you. When someone angles themselves away from you, when they shift in their seat, when they put a barrier between you, pay attention. It's easy to ignore, easy to tell yourself it doesn't mean anything. But body language is the rawest form of communication. And if someone is turning their back on you, even in the smallest way, they're already creating distance. The real question is, are you willing to see it? Or will you pretend it's nothing, just because the truth is harder to face? Because honesty never turns its back on you, and neither should the people you trust. 6. When laughter hides the truth. Ever tried to have a serious conversation with someone only for them to brush it off with a laugh? You're opening up, trying to talk about something real, maybe something that's been weighing on you, and instead of acknowledging it, they chuckle, crack a joke, and move on like it's nothing. At first, it might seem harmless, maybe even charming. But don't be fooled. When someone consistently laughs off serious topics, it's not just a personality quirk. It's a defense mechanism, a way to dodge responsibility, avoid accountability, and keep the truth buried under a smokescreen of humor. I've seen this firsthand. I was in a relationship where every time I tried to bring up something meaningful, the response was the same: laughter. I'd say, "Hey, I feel like we're disconnected lately." And I'd get back a laugh, followed by, "Oh, you're overthinking again. Relax." That laugh wasn't innocent. It was a way to dismiss the conversation entirely, a way to shut me down before things got too uncomfortable. And the pattern was always the same. Every time I tried to have a real discussion about the future, about feelings, about anything that required honesty, it was met with humor, sarcasm, or a quick subject change. That's when I learned that laughter in the wrong hands is a weapon. It can be used to disarm you, to make you second-guess yourself, to make you feel like you're the one making a big deal out of nothing. Epictetus once said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." That's exactly why some people use humor as a shield. They don't want to learn. They don't want to change. They just want to maintain the illusion that everything is fine. Most people will let it slide because humor is supposed to be a good thing, right? It lightens the mood, breaks the tension, makes everything feel easier. But when someone constantly uses laughter to escape serious conversations, it's not just a personality trait. It's a red flag. It means they don't want to go deeper. They don't want to face the truth. They'd rather keep things light and breezy, so you never push hard enough to uncover what's really there. And here's the dangerous part. If you let it happen, the real conversations, the ones that actually matter, never take place. Things stay on the surface. problems never get solved. And over time, you realize that while you might be talking to this person, you're not actually communicating at all. Seneca once said, "A guilty conscience needs no accuser." And that's what laughter does for some people. It acts as a cover, a disguise, a way to dodge the weight of the moment. Because the second they acknowledge the truth, they have to deal with it. And they don't want that. So what do you do when someone laughs off a serious conversation? You call it out. You ask, "Why is that funny to you?" A simple question, but one that forces them to sit in the discomfort they were trying to avoid. Because if they can't answer that, then you already have your answer. This isn't about humor. It's about avoidance. The truth is, honesty isn't always easy. It isn't always lighthearted. And it's definitely not something to laugh away. If someone can't take serious things seriously, then what does that say about their ability to build trust? To face hard truths? To be real with you when it actually matters? Because laughter might lighten a moment, but it doesn't erase what's hiding underneath. And if someone refuses to drop the act, you already know. They're not being honest with you.